Hello again. We are talking about parallelogram rules today. So this is what we're going through, just reviewing how to identify parallelograms and basically just kind of defining some of those rules. I know how much we love rules. That's why you're just really hating being at home without all the dress codes and rules that you have to follow every day. Me too. I, I just get all dressed up sometimes just so that I can be uncomfortable. But the only way that we can define different parallelograms is to use rules or definitions, maybe not rules. They have to meet certain criteria in order to be classified as a parallelogram. Kind of like for dogs, if I say I have a long-haired golden retriever, but my dog is short, has short black hair, and looks like a hot dog, you're not gonna say, "Wow, that's the coolest golden retriever I've ever seen." You're gonna be like, "You have a wiener dog, so it's not a long-haired golden retriever." Obviously, you have to define it and set some rules around what type of thing it is in order to tell us what it is. All right. Um, we want to understand how to use these parallelograms. So this is just like general rules of parallelograms. Again, I'm not going to dwell on these a lot. You will be able to pause a video or go in your textbook and go and see these if you are really interested in it. So here's just every parallelogram follows these rules. If a quadrilateral is a parallelogram, then its opposite sides are congruent. So not only are they parallel, but they're also congruent. If it is a parallelogram, then the opposite angles are congruent. So the angles that are directly across from each other would be congruent. Okay, then here, if it's a parallelogram, then its consecutive angles are supplementary. Not used too often, but x and y, when you add them together, is going to be 180. So these two will be supplementary, these two will be supplementary. So add them together, you get 180 consecutive angles. So if you keep going around like clockwise or counterclockwise, the two are supplementary. All right. If it has one right angle, then it has four right angles. So if it's got one right angle, that means it's going to be a rectangle or a square, and it's going to have four right angles. Because it's parallel, by definition, it's going to have four right angles. Okay? Let's see. The diagonals also have some special things about them. Diagonals of a parallelogram bisect each other. Okay, so if it's a parallelogram, then the diagonals bisect each other to form congruent lines. You can see that with these congruency marks right here. All right, if it's a parallelogram, then each diagonal separates the parallelogram into two congruent triangles. So it separates it into two congruent triangles. Remember, then we can use our CPCTC to solve a few more things about it, and that will be helpful, I'm sure, sometime in your life. All right, here let's talk specifically about a rectangle. All four angles are right angles. Opposite sides are parallel and congruent. Opposite angles are congruent. And consecutive angles are supplementary. Also, the diagonals bisect each other. So very similar to the rules for all parallelograms. But we know this, that a rectangle is defined by having four right angles. All four angles are right angles. That's kind of the defining characteristic there. All right, and then the diagonals, if a parallelogram is a rectangle, then the diagonals are congruent. So not only do they bisect each other, but they are also congruent to each other. That will be important. All right, so here just a little bit bigger, you can see this symbol, this image right here. Then we talk rhombus, okay? A rhombus, multiple would be rhombi, okay? All four sides are congruent. The diagonals are perpendicular, okay? And each diagonal bisects a pair of opposite angles. So those are kind of the defining characteristics. They're kind of at a slant. You'll recognize them. They're kind of at a slant a little bit, all right? The diagonals will be perpendicular, meaning at a 90-degree angle, and the diagonals bisect a pair of opposite angles. So basically, each diagonal is a bisector of the large angle here. Let's zoom this in just a little bit. Okay, the diagonals you can see here, angle P kind of gets split and angle 1 and 2 are congruent to each other, you know these are bisectors, okay? So it bisects these big angles, these diagonals do. All right, so just kind of to overview, we're talking about a square. A square is really, if a parallelogram is both a rectangle and a rhombus, then it is a square, okay? So this Venn diagram kind of shows you that. You might remember this from when we talked about it long ago. All right, rectangles, 4 right angles, rhombi, 4 congruent sides, 4 right angles, 4 congruent sides. You've got yourself a square, okay? And that's really it for the rules. You might want to go back and review some of these, that way you're familiar, and you might want to keep these on hand, some screenshots at least, so when we work through this tomorrow, finding some unknown values, that we would actually be able to use these rules to find those unknown values. Okay, great. Thank you for sticking with me. You guys have a great day.